What is good, guys? It's Rey-Jay back with another video, and in this one, I'm gonna break down what's going on with SPY, Tesla, the QQQ, and a couple of tickers out there. I'm gonna break down what's happening to the overall market, what I do predict to happen for Monday. I'm also gonna talk about the bigger trends on SPY and what's coming out for this week. But before I do anything like this, before I get into any more details, let me just mention a couple of things. I'm firstly not a financial planner, so make sure you take none of this as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out the Webull link, which is down below and in the description. If you sign up for Webull, the link down below, and deposit any amount of money into the account, you are guaranteed up to 12 free stocks. The offer ends very soon. It ends in just about 9 days, so check it out before they run out. With that out of the way, let's get on with the video. So what's going on with the market? How is SPY looking so far? Well, we had this head and shoulders like pattern that's starting to play out. We had a very, very nice sell-off on Friday for the bears. Now, looking at the trend, on the daily chart, we have a stronger amount of bearish momentum that is perpetuating. And then on the weekly chart, the candle looks very, very bearish for now. Looks like the market is reversing. We're getting ready for a more significant sell-off. But is this going to be a crash? The answer is no. I don't see this as a crash. I just see this as a very healthy pullback. But in terms of crashes, when a lot of people are talking about that, as I mentioned before on this channel, don't worry about like 340 on SPY, 400, even like 420 right now. I mean, it is possible for that to eventually come, but I just want to mention that you shouldn't worry too much about that for now until we break the next major level. And I'm going to talk about what that next major level is for SPY in just a couple of minutes. Let me just quickly go over this. For earnings for the week, we have Palantir, Lucid, Chegg, and just a couple of others, even Paramount very, very soon. For Tuesday, we have UPS, AMC, which is going to be a big one for retail. I know a lot of people are interested in AMC, and earnings should be very telling about their finances and etc. Then for Wednesday, we have Disney and Roblox and Sony all coming out, not to mention Alibaba for Thursday. And those are pretty much the big ones for the week. Most of the other earnings are just not as huge. And besides that, we do have CPI and PPI coming out at the end of the week. And until then, the data is not going to be that crazy. It's going to be kind of like very, very minor for the first couple of days of the week until Thursday and Friday when things get real. And this is going to be a very important CPI. It's going to have a big effect on the market, so make sure you're ready for that. Now, as far as SPY goes, let me just mention that we have two main trend lines to really watch for. We have this, hold on, we have this previous support right over here, which is once again going to be very telling to see if we end up breaking below this gap support right here first. So if SPY ends up breaking below like 446 or the low we made on Friday, this thing is going to come all the way down to about 442. And we happen to have our trend line very close to that area. So it's like 442 zone right about here is going to be our support. And then if this thing ends up getting like a bounce off that, there's a possibility we see some buyers stepping in at like 442 to defend this gap right here. So we might see the market just try to get a nice uptrend from there. And then if we eventually break down later on from this trend line, right? So what I'm trying to say is we test 442, we maybe bounce a little bit, then we come down lower and we might break this because of some other factor, whether it's CPI, whether it's the news, who knows what it's going to be. But a break below this first trend line of support, if that ends up coming, that's going to make me watch this right here. Let me just fix this chart. Give me 1 second. We're going to be watching our next really, really important level. And it's going to be this next trend line right here on the weekly chart. So anyways, going back, we have this right here. On the weekly chart on SPY, we have these two major support zones, which have actually created this trend line. And depending on the timing in which we touch this, this could be another like target for the next like couple of weeks. So hypothetically, let's just say the market tests like 442, we bounce off of it just a little bit, then we come right back down after some more bad news comes, we break below 440. What levels should we be watching for? Well, based off this, it really depends on the timing. If it's a very, very quick sell-off, if something really bad happens quickly, as soon as we approach like, September, we could be all the way back down to like 420 if it's like a really big sell-off. But if it takes a little bit longer, if it's like closer to like November by the time we bottom, not November, sorry, October. If it's closer to like October, end of September, if we bottom around that period, then the bottom could be close to like 425 to 430 around this area right here. And then once we approach like October, we could see the market get a very, very strong bounce and a push up for November, approaching December. I think that's very probable for a strong close to the end of the year. So like I said before, the market could come all the way down to this 425 to 430 area on the weekly chart. That's what this is suggesting. Depending on the timing, like I said before, and also depending on catalysts. And then we could get a nice bounce off that level before we see another pump for the end of the year. That's what I'm predicting as of right now. I think that's very likely on the bigger trends. Anyways, I want to talk about a couple of other stocks out there. Looking at the market, I just want to mention that, like I said before, SPY is looking kind of weak. For tomorrow, I'm going to be watching for a potential gap up. I think she might try to gap up around like 447 or so. And then we're going to be watching, can SPY hold above 448? Can SPY manage to do that? If it pulls that off, there's going to be some hope for the bulls that this market can hold up a little bit longer. If it fails, which I think it's very likely it will, as fear is trying to bring itself back into the markets, I think it might get a rejection off this 448 area, reject and start cooling off. And if we break 446, we're going to be watching this thing come all the way back down to 442. And I think it's very likely that is going to happen to fill the gap down there. And I think that's very possible. I think the market's looking weak right now, and it's very healthy for the market to cool off a bit. So I do anticipate another day where the market tries to gap up and slows down, and the market gets another red close. I think that's very probable. That's what I'm seeing for SPY. Looking at something else like the IWM, for instance, I see something very similar as SPY. Might gap up and retest 194 before it continues lower. On Tesla, this is going to be very critical because when you zoom out on Tesla, you will notice that we have this trend right about here. You can basically draw a trend line here and here, right? That's going to be our support and resistance. Uh, Tesla is in a position where it should bounce very soon off this like 250 area, or at least make an attempt to do so before it continues. And once it tests this 250 area, we will see if Tesla ends up continuing to downtrend or not. So what is the trend on Tesla? Let me just show you what it looks like. I actually have it here on TradingView. I know some people are requesting it. I'll show you. So for Tesla, basically looks like this. It's been stuck between support and resistance right about here. If you look at, for instance, our 15-minute time frame, and let me just zoom out a little bit for you, you will notice this. So Tesla's been stuck between, support and resistance, going back and forth and back and forth. And as this thing continues to move, it's continuing to be stuck between these levels. So you can kind of draw it out like this as our support, and then we have this resistance right about up here. Uh, Now, looking at it, at least from this trend, it's quite evident that Tesla is continuing to weaken a bit. It's continuing to respect this downtrend. And as it continues to downtrend and remains in this channel, I'm going to be watching to see, can Tesla hold these levels? Because if Tesla ends up getting a break to the downside, if Tesla ends up failing on us, there's a very good chance that 250 is going to be our critical support on it. And if that breaks, we're going to see a lot more downside. But this is what the trend is kind of like looking like on the 15-minute time frame, right? We've been stuck within this range for quite some time. And I'm going to be watching to see, can we get a bounce off this 250 zone? Can we come down here and like get a nice bounce and just be stuck in this channel for a little bit longer? Or are we going to break below 250, break below this trend line, and then start sinking even lower? It's going to be one of those two. Uh, I think it's very probable that the trend is going to be continuing to show signs of downside. I think it's going to downtrend most likely, but it's really hard to predict exactly how it's going to do this. Are we going to be stuck in this trend going back and forth and back and forth? Or are we going to break below 250? We'll have to see based off the news and these other factors. But either way, I do see it breaking below 250 in the future. I think it's going to come down, try to bounce a little bit, and make its way down to 250 in the near term, and eventually come down to fill its gap all the way down into the 230s. Very high 230s. I think it's very likely and very probable for this stock. As far as like Aapl goes, this is looking quite weak right now. I mean, it was trying to hold up. We saw buyers stepping in and attempting to hold this thing up, but now it's selling off pretty hard. I'm going to be looking for another gap up on Aapl as well. And we could get a back test of this like 186 area to 185, this like previous support becoming resistance before it continues lower. So there's a chance it could gap up just a little bit, try to pop a tiny bit, then make its way right back down. But if that ends up not being the case, if it continues to sell off harder after doing that, it might not be able to make its way that high. It could just gap up to about like 184 instead and come short of like 186 and then end up selling off. So I'm seeing like a gap up for Aapl, then a continuation to the downside. I'm going to be watching this support right about here on this 176 area, which I think Aapl could test. So I'm seeing this thing gapping up. It's either going to retest 184 or 186, then come down lower and start selling off even more, most likely. We will see if it breaks below the low it currently has. The triple Q looks weak. I'm going to be looking for the same thing, a gap up potentially, maybe a retest of like 373.5 or so. Then it continues to sell off. And we're going to be watching for a test of about 368, which I think is very likely. And we have an unfilled gap over there as well. I think that's very probable to happen to it. Nvidia is also not looking that great just yet. I would mention the fact that this trend right here is getting tighter and tighter and tighter. But what you will notice is that we do have a downtrend that's being respected as it's making lower highs and lower lows on the bigger time frame. I believe there's a good chance that Nvidia is going to come down, retest this low right about here. We could see it come down to this like 436 to 434 area, try to bounce a little bit, then continue a little bit lower. And I'm going to be watching this 428 area over the next couple of days. I think that's going to be very critical for it. And if this does break, we could see Nvidia sink a little bit lower, but I do believe it's going to retest first off 430 and potentially 428 very soon, looking a little bit more bearish. I think that's very probable on the larger time frames. Looking at AMD, and the same thing is going on with this. It's not looking that great. It's very flat right now, but I am anticipating it to retest our 200, make its way down to about 113, and we'll see if it tries to hold there or not, but it's looking a little bit weak. The VIX is continuing to break out, holding above our 50 moving average and our 200 EMA simultaneously. The VIX is getting strength finally. I'm going to be looking for a backtest of like 16.5 or so before this thing continues higher. And I could see this thing making its way up to the 18s. The dollar is also just a little bit down, but we're going to be watching if it could hold 102, which is currently its support. If 102 holds, that's going to be a bearish signal for the markets. If it keeps pumping, another bearish signal. For Coinbase, for example, we're going to be watching this imbalance down here, all the way down to about this 84 level. So I'm thinking that it's going to try to bounce a little bit in the pre-market, retest like 87, if not make its way up to like 80, 88 or so. And then it's going to sell off even harder and come down to at least 84, if not lower than that. It's looking a little bit more bearish, continuing to respect a nice downtrend. I think the odds greatly favor that. For Google, I'm seeing the same thing going on. I think Google is going to continue to look more bearish. I'm going to be watching for a backtest of about 129.5 or so, maybe a little bit lower than that. So maybe 129 could be tested. For it projects, it comes all the way down to about this 127.3 area. And a break below that, we're going to be watching it come all the way down to about 124. I think that could be a good target for Google. It is looking more bearish right now. It looks like the market may slow this thing down over the next couple of like trading days, if not weeks. We could see it come down to like 124. And then for like the really short term, I'm going to be watching how it reacts to 127. If that breaks, I could see it come all the way down to retest this level right about here. 125.5 is going to be one target. Also, like 127 flat is going to be our other support. So I'm going to be watching if 127 breaks. 125 will come after that. For Amazon, it had a really, really nice pump, and now it's starting to slow down a little bit. It might actually continue a little bit lower and make its way down to retest 134.76. So I could see Amazon cooling off just a little bit because of the market, but then we will see if it tries to base around there or not. And Meta is looking a little bit weaker. Once again, very, very flat. We're going to be watching 309 as support. If that fails, this is 307, 305, and then 300 flat. Also, don't forget about this big change in volatility. So we're going to be watching this 298 level as our major support. That's going to be very important for it. And with that said, guys, I think I went over the majority of the stocks out there. The market is looking more bearish than bullish. I'm going to be looking for some gaps to the upside in the morning before more downside intraday. I do believe the market has more downside to come. But make sure you watch for your critical levels. Make sure you watch and see if SPY breaks this low right here. If it breaks it, 442 becomes very likely. But if it tries to hold above this, the bulls need to see this hold above 448 and they will have some hope. All right. But like I said before, I am predicting we're going to see the market attempt to hold up for the very, very beginning. Then it's going to end up failing. We're going to see more downside. And I do believe SPY is going to test 442 very, very soon. And then we will see what happens after that. But I will talk more about that a little bit later. For now, just be prepared for that move. And until I see you guys again, remain calm, cool, and collected. Thank you all so much for listening. Have an absolutely spectacular weekend. The market to the moon as long term is still incredibly bright. And peace out.